do preliminary prayers today?
I think, what have we got today? What is our topic today? I forget. It's not discovering Buddhism.
No, it's not discovering Buddhism. It's Happiness Toolbox.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so it's no, we don't. Yeah, we can do. Now you have it there. Why not? What have you just? We'll just
Yeah,
do one.
we have it. Prayers.
We'll just do the refuge prayer. That's all. So what have you got here? What have you got here, Andre?
Sangye Chodan Soki
That's all we
Chonamwa.
That's the first one, is it? Huh?
Yes.
That's all. That's all we need is the first one. It's okay. So are we ready to go? Shall I start?
Yes.
Who is translating?
Sangye
Andre.
Chodan.
Okay. Andre. Andre, can you hear me? Andre, can you hear me?
Just a second. I will try to do it. I'm sorry.
Andre, can you hear me?
It's a little bit.
Can you hear me, Andre?
Yes, I can.
Well, can you please wait? Just wait. Are we ready to start the class?
Yes, we are.
Where's the translator?
Translator is fine.
Okay. So you can lead it. That's fine. Normally the teacher leads it, but you can lead it. But I'll explain first. Okay. So good morning or good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here. The sun is going away. I put some paper on my one window, but not the other. At least my face is there, so I can see you. Again, half light. Very crazy. Never mind. So listen, we're going to just do a little prayer this time. I forget if we did it last time. And if you know it, you can do it too. And it's got two meanings. The first two lines are just for those of us who already feel like we're Buddhists. And it's reminding us of our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And then the second two lines, they're stating an altruistic motivation for our being together here today. We're thinking we're going to listen to these ideas, Buddha's ideas about reality, about happiness, about suffering, so we can take some tools from it, so we can develop our amazing potential, so we can be a benefit to others. So thinking like that when we sing the prayer, and Andre can lead the prayer in Russian. In Russian, please.
Русский. В Будде, Дхарме и Высшем Собрании ищу прибежище вплоть до просветления. Силою заслуг от практики даяния и других парамид достану я Буддой на благо всех существ. В Будде, Дхарме и Высшем Собрании ищу прибежище вплоть до просветления. Силою заслуг от практики даяния и других парамид достану я Буддой на благо всех существ. В Будде, Дхарме и Высшем Собрании ищу прибежище вплоть до просветления. Силу заслуг от практики даяния и других парамид достану я Буддой на благо всех существ.
Okay, thank you so much. Good. Now I can see you all. Okay. Happy to be here again. Okay, so my sun's shining at me. Okay, so Anastasia sent me some questions. So maybe we should have, wait a minute, my table isn't right. There we go. So maybe we should have some of those questions first. So I've got them here and I will read them and then answer the question. And then we'll continue our discussions. So, I think I answered some of these, but I can't remember which ones now. Anastasia has marked them, but okay. I don't understand the difference. Now, Anastasia, you're going to have to tell me. The ones you made grey, are they answered or not answered? I'm so sorry. Is Anastasia there? Can she tell me, please?
Yes, Venerable. Those which are matched in grey, those are answered questions.
Okay. Okay, all right, thank you. So one question then from somebody is, how can we help a person who is in a negative state of mind? Well, remember this discussion, you know, this is really quite important. This is really, in fact, a huge thing when we understand what practice is and what Buddhism is. There's this analogy that a bird needs two wings, okay? So, and not, you know, if we know, if we've heard any Buddhism at all, the Lam Rim, for example, this Tibetan packaging of all the teachings, they're structured in an orderly way, you know, and I like to call the first parts junior school and high school, and then you've got university, and then actually you've got postgraduate. So now a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. Well, the wisdom wing is junior school and high school. The compassion wing is university. Now we all know you can't go to university first. It's logical. All knowledge we try to study, whatever it might be, cooking, computers, anything. Well, here it's exactly the same in Buddhism. What we're trying to learn here is how to become this amazing human being, how to develop this marvelous human being into a Buddha. Well, it's got to be done in stages. You know, you can't go to university math. You can't even go to high school math until you've done junior school. Maybe you'll do it quickly, but it's got to go in order. Now, that's something that we're not used to thinking when it comes to spiritual practice. And especially with spiritual practice, we tend to think of it, you know, as being compassionate, and we're absolutely right. That is the main point. The compassion wing of the bird is the main point. But as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, compassion is not enough. You've got to have wisdom. So that's a bit sort of grand sounding. Oh, you've got to be wise, you know, but it's very practical. And what wisdom is in Buddhism is what you get when you do the wisdom wing work, which is all the first level of practice in Buddhism, you know, controlling your body, your speech, and your mind. So if we're driven by attachment and depression and anxiety and anger, and that's Buddha's whole point, that's why we all suffer. If you're suffering, that's why you suffer, baby. And we're talking about the more subtle suffering, not, you know, necessarily being poor or sick. We're talking about the mind here. The mind is Buddha's expertise. So the first job you have to do is help yourself, put yourself together. Because the fact is this, if compassion wing is the point, which is to help others, how can you be aware of others? How can you help others if you're still so neurotic yourself, you can't even see past your own nose? And this is the whole point. When we begin to understand this, it makes a lot of sense, you know, because what prevents me from helping others, which is what prevents me from helping myself, is my own attachment, my anger, my anxiety, my fears, my jealousy, my worries. That's what makes me miserable. That's what makes me so narrow-minded. That's what makes me completely absorbed in myself. Therefore, forget about helping others. I can't even help myself. So to be able, how can you help a person who's in a negative state of mind? Good Lord, that's the point of the life, to help people. But honey, if you don't know your own negative state of mind, if you don't understand your attachment and your anger and your fears and your worries, you can't possibly help somebody else. And this is the point. Why we suffer is because of our own attachment. Why we suffer is because of our own anger. And why, in other words, is why we suffer is because of our negative state of mind. And when we're caught up in our negative state of mind, we're blinded and can't see others. Okay, you don't wait till you've achieved nirvana, which is really when you finish the wisdom wing. You've completely removed all the delusions from your mind. You've completely realized emptiness. You're an amazing being. You're blissfully happy and very, but also incredibly clear and wise. Because the whole point of practice first is the more I understand myself, the more I work on my own neediness and attachment and depression, then that much, one, am I more happy and content, but crucially, number two, to that degree, am I then clear and can see others and know how to help them. So that we try to help now, but we're just limited. And the thing that limits us is our own, actually, is attachment. We've talked about attachment. Attachment is my own dissatisfaction, my own emotional hunger, my own always wanting something more. And also, you see, the key thing with attachment is that the main part of attachment, the main energy of attachment is this junkie inside us. This junkie inside us, you know, that only wants nice experiences, that only wants things to be lovely, that only we can only cope when things are nice. So if that's the way we are now, let's say you've got your sister and you're trying to help your sister because she's got a negative state of mind, then, you know, this is the point here. It's a long answer, but here's the point. Helping your sister is the compassion wing. That means you've got to have love, compassion, kindness, wisdom, crucially wisdom. You've got to know how to help her. So especially when it comes to negative state of mind, always depressed, always angry, if you do not know your own, even a little bit, you cannot know how to help your sister. And the other thing is, because your attachment is like, we don't think of it like this in our culture, but attachment makes us only want, you know, the attachment part of you is upset because your sister's unhappy. Your compassion and love reach out to her, that part of yourself, but they're polluted by your attachment. And so when it comes to being our sister or like your alcoholic brother or something, our attachment is so strong that makes us kind of manipulate the sister, manipulate your brother. You stick your nose in where it doesn't belong. You try to force them to change, thinking you're being compassionate and kind, but you're not. You're interfering in their life because you don't notice. They don't want your advice. So you've got to have wisdom, which comes from working on your own mind. And because it's compassion that makes you want to help somebody, but it's wisdom that gives you the power to know how. And often, especially when it comes, I mean, it's easy to help somebody with a headache, you give them a pill. It's easy to help somebody who's poor, you give them money. It's easy to help someone, but it's not easy to help someone who's negative and depressed and angry. You've got to have real wisdom to understand what they're experiencing and to know, therefore, how to help them. And the only way you can know how to help them is the more you are understanding yourself. This is really the best answer. So it takes time. I mean, you know, like if you're a mother, let's say, and you've got an angry kid. So the point is, all you do is see your angry child. But what if you're angry? You don't even factor that in. If you're angry as well, you can't help your daughter. You cannot help your daughter with her anger, because every time you see her angry, you'll get angry. And so the whole thing just explodes. But if you've got some wisdom and you understand anger because you can see your own and you're able to control it, then you can be wise in the way you help your daughter. Otherwise, it's a disaster. Because the point that Buddha's making, the way we see the world out there is through the lenses of our own neuroses or our own virtue as well. So if you already worked on your mind and you're kind and you're patient and you're very wise, you can see very well how to help somebody. And the fact is, often you can't help somebody. You can give advice, but it's up to them to take the advice. You can't force. So it's a long answer to the question, but it's a really important way to understand it. You've got to start working on your own mind. I mean, as a simple analogy, you know, you're like, if you ask me, how can I help a person who eats bad food? How can I help them with nutrition? Well, the first answer is learn nutrition yourself. It's pretty obvious. But we don't often think that when it comes to helping people with their mental problems, with their problems and their struggles and their negativity. We don't factor ourselves in. You know, how do I help a person play piano? Guess what? Learn to play piano yourself. That's the first step. Same here. That's a long answer. What's the difference between mind, body, and soul? I'm sure I answered this, but never mind. Buddha doesn't talk about a soul, okay? So if you're a Christian, they talk about a soul. And this soul is like the essence of yourself, isn't it? That comes from a creator. The same with the Muslims. The Greeks call it an essence. We in the West, we simply call it self. The Hindus call it Atman, self. And it's this third component, isn't it? We have the mind, which we in our culture think of as the brain. Then we have body. And the third component we tend to have, if we're religious, is a soul. Buddha doesn't add that component. He says we don't have such an extra thing. But what he does say we do have is mind. And the difference for Buddha about what the mind is, and we've discussed this, I'm sure, is that it is not your brain. It is not physical. You know, your body is one thing and your mind is something completely different, but they're inextricably linked from the Buddhist perspective. You know, the body and the mind are utterly inextricably linked. And in using the Western model, the neuroscientific model, we can see that. What goes on in your body affects your feelings. What goes on in your feelings affects your body. I mean, all these experiments they've now done on people's brains, you know, they're seeing that what you do in your thinking process changes your brain. But the Buddha's view is your brain isn't your mind. Your body isn't your mind. Your mind is not physical. And the other radical difference for the Buddha is the subtlety of the mind. You know, we think of the mind only in the materialist world, the neuroscientific world, the model of the mind. You know, okay, in the Buddhist view, in the more esoteric teachings, they talk about we've got gross body, which comes along with gross mind. Then we have subtle body and subtle mind. Then we have very subtle body and very subtle mind. So the gross body and mind is all we posit in the West. So, you know, when you die, you go through these stages of this deconstruction of these different levels of our mental and physical being. And by the time you stop breathing and all your senses have ceased, that's what death is for the modern world. But you're not dead yet. Your mind has got these subtler levels. You can't see the physical indication of them in the body. You're not breathing, your heart has stopped, but your consciousness, your mind is still there, but at subtler levels. And this is where now meditation we talked about, you know, this skillful technique made up by these Indians more than 3,000 years ago, which the Buddha took with him very happily when he diverged in his own direction 500 years later, called single pointed concentration, or the world knows it as mindfulness. When you've accomplished that, this brilliant skill, you've completely subdued the grosser level of your mind, all the sensory, and even you've subdued all the levels of conceptuality. You've gone beyond that level to this subtle level of mind that we don't even posit as existing in the modern world, you know. So we've got these much subtler levels of consciousness, much subtler levels of mind that also are linked to a subtler level of physicality. It's a very different way of seeing things. So the Buddha doesn't discuss a soul. So what we mean by thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, you know, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being to much subtler levels, all of that is your mind. Only the grosser level of it, at the sensory level, do we need a brain? That's a Buddhist answer to your question. And your mind, of course, doesn't come from someone else. It doesn't come from your mother, doesn't come from a creator, it can't come from nothing. Buddha's view is clear. It's a continuity of mental moments. It comes from before. Your mind goes back. It's got its own continuity. It goes back and back in previous lives. And when you die, it will continue in future lives. That's the Buddha's view about the mind. So the next question from Vita. No, that was from Vita. What is the mind in between incarnations? Okay. So maybe that means we should talk about the death process a little bit. It's most interesting. You know, there's a book of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's that's out again. It's been published initially. It's now out as a paperback. It came out earlier this year or last year, which I happen to edit, so I'm quite familiar with the teachings in it. And it's called How to Face Death Without Fear. And I really, you know, people love to have courses on this book because people are very fascinated by the death process, you know, and I think really appreciate Buddha's views about the death process. So let me just explain briefly. Then, you know, the Buddha's view, like I just said, the mind goes back and back and back. This mental continuum, they refer to it. It's like a river of mental moments. You know, this non-physical part of us that is our sensory consciousness and our mental consciousness. And it goes again to, as I said, very subtle levels. So the time of death, like I mentioned, you know, the grosser level, it is described in 8 stages. And this is from the Vajrayana teachings. It's most fascinating. We have gross, like I said, gross consciousness. Mind and consciousness, by the way, are synonymous. We have gross consciousness, which is all the sensory consciousness, you know, the ability to function through your senses, and which is obviously linked to the gross body. So the first 4 stages of this 8 stages of this process of gradual deconstruction of the components of the person, what we call death, is listed in great detail in all the literature. You know, at first, the first 4 stages, your eye consciousness, your ear consciousness, your nose consciousness, the 5 senses have completely ceased. And then by the time the 4th stage, you completely stop breathing. And that's what we mean by death in our culture. But you know, the gross level only has ceased. So then your mind goes through this continual 4 more stages of subtlety. And this is a very different model. This is, we might have described this, I don't remember. And this is similar to the Tibetan medical system. And you'll notice it's similar to the Chinese Ayurvedic system, and certainly the Indian, the Indian Ayurvedic or the Chinese acupuncture system. It describes this subtle physical energy. Well, according to this view, it talks about how we have this subtle physical body, which is made up of these 72,000 subtle channels, like a subtle nervous system. It's physical energy, it's subtle, but you can't see it with a microscope. It's quite subtle, but it's made up of the four elements, and coursing through those 72,000 channels are all these different wind energies, or prana in Sanskrit. And this is the relation, this is completely linked to our health. I think a few centuries ago in our European world, or Russian and European world, we talked like this. But this model, you've got all these different wind energies, and the Tibetan doctors, they study this for like 12, 13 years, and it's the balance of all these different winds, which is what makes our health. So, and then it's inextricably linked to our mental states. They're said to be more subtle, and they're coursing through all these channels, linked inextricably with their own different wind energies. So you go to your Tibetan doctor, she'll feel your pulses, and she can feel the imbalance of this wind and that wind, and she knows this particular wind is linked to your attachment, and that's why it's all out of balance. That's why you're having anxiety and panic attacks. Or this wind is linked to your anger. That's why everything's out of you get crazy. So it's a very interesting relationship, the physical and the mental at the subtle level. So at this stage of death, gradually all the different wind energies, which are coursing through all our different channels in the entire body with the different states of mind, this is the same as what happens when you go to sleep. It's exactly the same. All the winds disappear from all the other channels and come into what they call the central channel, which goes from the crown of your head and ends at the penis for the male or the cervix for the female. All the different winds, and therefore the different states of your mind, which they say they ride on the winds. They all come absorbing into the central channel. And then everything eventually, and this is what happens when you get to the 8th stage of death, or the deepest of sleep, everything absorbs. All the winds and all the different states of mind cease, and they all come to the center, to the heart chakra. There's different points in this channel. They're called chakras, where all the different channels kind of constrict. And there's right at the heart chakra, everything stops there. And that's the 8th stage of death. And that's when that's the subtlest level of your mind. They call it the clear light mind, or the very subtle mind. And all the gross physical energies have ceased. So now, that can happen. That could stay there for like 3 days after you've stopped breathing. So one of the important things in this tradition, in the Vajrayana tradition, which is based on this system, you don't touch the body for 3 days. You leave the body for 3 days. You don't just go and burn it or chuck it in the ground, ideally. And there are ways of checking when the mind has left. So anyway, when the mind does leave the body, and it can be up to 3 days, like I said, from the time you stop breathing, this very subtle mind, basically before that, just to explain a bit more, before you even stop breathing, once this process has started, this deconstruction process, the karmic seeds that will be the karmic seed from your actions, and basically karma, I forget what we've talked about, I'm so sorry. But karma, every millisecond, we have talked about it, every millisecond of what we think and do and say is stored in our mind. Nothing goes astray. Nothing goes astray. Nothing. All stored there. And then eventually those seeds will ripen in the future as our own experiences. I mean, we are our own creator, as the Dalai Lama puts it. So anyway, we're carrying these seeds, and I kind of joke and say we've got all these seeds in our different bank vaults, Of course, Buddha doesn't talk about a bank vault. But the main seed in this main bank vault, which is they're called I forget the term, the complete seed, and we haven't discussed how you create that. But in our case, we can say, okay, I'll say this much. In our case, our being human, we can deduce logically that one of our very powerful, virtuous karmic seeds from the habit of non-killing, and as Lama Zopa said, probably practice in the context of living in vows of non-killing within a spiritual practice. So those very rich, delicious karmic seeds, in our case, we can deduce logically, having a human body, that one of our non-killing karmic seeds was triggered before we stopped breathing. And this is why, as Lama Zopa says in this book of his, that if you want to help anybody in their life, at death is when they need you most, to literally, because death is very fearful, because we all have attachment. Nobody wants to die. Nobody prepares for death. And at the time of death comes, then it's very scary for most people. So then you need to be there with a person. It's like they've got a spiritual practice. Your mummy might be Christian. Your sister might be a Buddhist. Then you learn to know how to help them in the weeks and months before. And this book of Love and Opus is like a handbook. It's so, so helpful. I can't tell you. You know, you should really do it as a course. And it's in the Discovering Buddhism. I mean, I'm more than happy to do it for you. I know I love this book very much. You know, we can discuss all that. Get somebody else to teach it. It's in the Discovering Buddhism modules, right? So anyway, at the time of our death, before we stop breathing, this particular karmic seed in our case from past non-killing was triggered, which means already it programmed us. It was already, we were programmed even before we left the previous body, not more than a few weeks before we found our way to our present mother's human womb. That seed was triggered such that when we did die, when the very subtle mind left the body, ready to go to our mother's fallopian tube to join the egg and sperm of our mummy and daddy when they hop into bed that day, because that's the condition we need, isn't it? So what did the mind do between that dying, leaving the body, and then going to the fallopian tube, which is the point of this question? Well, there's a state, they call it literally in Tibetan, the intermediate state, a bardo. And I think if you read all the Christian teachings and you know those well, you know, you'll hear about you go to purgatory. I think these over the centuries, all the great yogis in the different spiritual traditions have seen similar things, but I think they interpret them very differently, don't they? I mean, clearly the Christian view, but the similarities, that's what they call purgatory. Or for the Buddha, they call it the intermediate state. And it's basically you're waiting for your new parents to come along. That's all. They haven't hopped into bed yet. You know, if you can die from the second you die, and if your mummy and daddy hop into bed next minute, you don't have to wait around. You don't need to be in you might go to the intermediate state, but just for a second. And basically it's like a dream state. They describe this 8 stages of death, and it's very similar to what happens every time we go to sleep. So the grosser level when you go to sleep, and then when you go to sleep, don't you, the first 4 stages have ceased and you're unconscious. You can then, your subtle mind then has experiences of dreams. Well, the bardo is just like that. When you leave the body, then you kind of wake up in a reverse state, and you wake up in this subtle state, just like a dream state, just exactly like a dream state. Exactly, it's your subtle mind having these weird experiences like you know that dreams are, isn't it? Because your gross mind is not functioning. So that's your subtle mind. And that intermediate state can, they say from the experience of the yogis, they see that it lasts up to 7 human weeks, 49 days. It can be very quick. It can be up to 49 days. Because in that period, then, you know, when the karma ripens and your mummy and daddy hop into bed or whatever happens with Petri dishes now, things are all different, but the egg and the sperm have to come together. And that's the condition. And then when you're in the intermediate state and the karma ripens and your mummy and daddy hop into bed, then you rush like a magnet and you go to that egg and sperm, and then you enter your mother's fallopian tube. That's the answer. If everything that's, somebody else says, if everything is happening to me now as a result of my actions, then it looks like I don't have a will. Well, I tell you, it's perfectly fine, but this is one of the commonest questions on the planet. Whoever I ever speak to, it's the commonest question. Everybody in every culture has exactly the same question, which is really most fascinating. We should look at why we even have that question. So I think to unpack it, we need to unpack the assumptions in that question, okay? So certainly in English, we usually use the term free will. And everybody says it, including scientific people. Everybody seems to act as if we have such a thing. But we ought to be respectful and give the appropriate respect to where that concept comes from. Well, that is a Christian concept. It's taught by the Christians that God, when he made us, he gave us free will. So I want to discuss that. So why we assume we have such a thing. If we really analyze it carefully, it's not a possibility. It's a meaningless concept. And so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater now and think I'm saying that we don't have such an ability to make a decision. That's different. But the concept here I'm questioning, and you don't say it in your question, and perhaps you don't say that in Russian, I don't know, but the use of the word free. So free will, I mean, anyway, never mind if you use it or not, but in English we say that. And that's what I'm taught by that God gave me. So what he means is this: God gave me the opportunity to choose any given time in my life between good and bad. Now, in general, Buddhism, of course, agrees, but it's more nuanced, it's more subtle than that. To say that it's a free will implies it's not dependent. And that is an impossibility for Buddhism. So, of course, I have the ability to choose in general, but let's just put it this way. Do I have the choice? So check the last time you were angry. Check the last time you got depressed. I don't think you would ever say, oh, I think yesterday, Robina, I chose to be depressed. Nobody says that. Oh, I chose to be angry. Nobody says that. And it doesn't feel like that. Actually, it feels like the opposite, doesn't it? Like you didn't even have any choice at all, that circumstances were so strong that you were forced into this profound depressed state, that the conditions were so strong that you just had to explode the words out of your mouth. So in general, you could say, this is a Buddhist way of putting it, the stronger your habit to do or think anything is then when you do have the option to choose, it's easy to choose that option. So in a sense, you would argue from the Buddhist view, we do actually, intention is one of the main parts of our mind, intention, volition, I will. But if the habit to be angry is so strong in your mind, if the habit to be angry has been there for countless lives and you come into this life, and I can tell you with me, it was that way. My mother did not have to teach me to be angry. I just knew it. So clearly in the Buddhist analysis, intention does play a role. But if the habit is so strong, it's like you don't have an intention. It's like you don't have a choice, because the habits push you in that direction so fearfully. But it doesn't mean you're stuck in that, because we've got intelligence. And I've learned since I've been, since a little girl, I've learned to change my anger. I don't get angry in the same situations now because I do have the ability to choose. And so I've worked hard on my mind to change that habit and to develop a new habit of being patient. So yes, intention is always there, but virtually with much of what we do, all our ancient emotional habits, they're so instinctive because we've done them for so long. It's like a joke to say that certainly you can't have such a thing as free will. The ability to choose is always there, but you've got to work very hard at it. So you could argue by the time you've realized emptiness, or by the time you've got bodhicitta, now you're so programmed in wisdom and compassion that, of course, intention is there, but your ability to be patient and compassionate and wise is like effortless because you've programmed your mind in those habits. So it's more nuanced than merely saying, you've got free will, which God says, and then suddenly, now the real point to get to your question, it's fascinating that we always ask this question when we hear about karma, which means we hear that I choose to do what I do now, let's say kill or be kind or loving, because I've done it before. And for whatever reason, we assume that because it's past karma, then I have to be stuck and therefore I have no choice. So it's like two extremes. Free will is this absurd idea that anyone can choose anything at any time without depending on other circumstances, which is exactly the Buddha's view. Everything is dependent. Everything is contingent. That's an impossibility, to be able to freely choose anything. That's absurd. It's evidently not true. If it were true, then the last time you were depressed, you could have caught your mind and said, I won't be depressed. But we know perfectly well it's not like that, because the habit is so strong in the mind, and then we only notice it when we're lying in bed inert. Or the anger is the same. So we are driven by habits. We can see from our own experience we're driven by habits. And that already answers the question and then we do know that we can change habits. So therefore we don't have free will, which is too extreme, too absolute, means we've got the ability to choose without any conditions. That's not possible. And equally, because we're driven by our past habits, that proves we can choose. We've obviously chosen in the past to be angry, so now the habit is to be angry. So now we can hear about patience, and then because I'm intelligent, I can go, well, that's an interesting idea. I can learn not to be angry. And we've all chosen to do that every day. Every day. I mean, our own experience proves that yes, we are driven by habits, which is the meaning of karma. And just because we're driven by habits doesn't mean we can't change. In fact, being driven by habits proves we can change. That's how come you look at every day. You wake up in this life and you've never played piano, have you? You're completely innocent. You know no music, but you know perfectly well, you're driven by the habit of not playing music, but you can learn to play music. You can decide, I will play music, but it doesn't happen like that. You need a piano, you need a teacher, you need lots of effort, and you need lots of will. And then you'll slowly develop the new habit to play piano. It's exactly the same with everything in our mind. So I hope that answers your question. Is it something like energy centers or chakras? I answered that, yeah. And they don't, it's a subtler level of our physical energy. It's a very detailed description in the Vajrayana literature about these different channels, and a chakra, all it means, we call them energy centers, and there's a lot of, I don't know all the way they talk about in different traditions, but the Buddhist view is very clear. There's nothing fancy about chakras. They're not special, believe me. It's a constriction of some of these channels at these different points, here, at the heart, and further down there are several. So that, people who are a little bit sensitive to their subtle mind can feel certain times. Well, even here, there's one here. Okay, there's one here. When you're about to cry, or you feel it here, don't you? Very strong, very powerful in the throat. That's when the energy, because mind is more subtle. Mental consciousness, our thoughts and feelings are more subtle, and they are coursing through all these channels. So when certain emotions come, for sure, we can feel these energies. When the great Vajrayana practitioners, they're learning to completely control their mind, but also completely to control their subtle physical energies. So they can completely work with this energy. The greatest yogis have complete control over all of their mind and these subtle physical energies. So it's dealt with, and anybody in this life who now talks about chakras and things, where do you think it's come from? The great Tibetan yogis, and then before that from the Hindus. So that's, of course, this is the source. This Tibetan Buddhism is the source of all the practices, of anything to do with this stuff. And that's postgraduate level, okay? So what else is there? How to stop searching for people's approval. Well, this is the story of everybody's life. This is the deepest attachment we have. I mentioned it. So we've got attachment. This is, the first levels of practice in the wisdom wing, the very first level of practice, junior school, entry level, grade 1. You don't even think about your mind yet. You just control your body and your speech. And I like to call the body and speech the servants of our mind. So if anger is in my mind, and my speech just vomits out the anger, doesn't it? If anger is in my mind, my fist will just punch the person in the nose. So the very first level of practice, junior school, the first level of practice in Buddhism is control your body and control your speech. Harness your crazy verbal and physical energy. And why? Well, because that makes a mess and harms people. But the real reason at this first stage of practice is because everything I think and do and say programs my mind, puts seeds in my mind that will ripen as my future experience. So the main motivation at the first level of practice in Buddhism is because guess what? I don't want to be suffering in the future. Just like you go to your nutritionist, your doctor, and she says, don't eat sugar, you might get diabetes. Oh, wow, how intelligent. So the motivation to stop eating sugar is so you want to be healthy. Well, here we're talking mental health, because karma is this fundamental law of the Buddhas that is observed, that everything we think and do and say sows seeds in our mind and produces our future. So by killing and stealing and lying, guess what kind of future you're going to provide for yourself? Who wants that? Nobody. So you learn to control your body and speech. Then you get to high school, and now you become your own therapist, as Namayeshi puts it. Now you start to really work on your mind, all the crazy delusions. So the three main delusions, attachment, aversion, and ignorance, there are thousands of them, but they all subsume to these three poisons, the three toxic emotions. Attachment and anger, effectively in daily life, are the two we swing between 1,000 times a day. Ignorance is like the root delusion, the root misconception deep in our bones about the very nature of our own self. And we uproot that when we get more advanced, when we've realized emptiness. But in day-to-day life, we have to learn to become very familiar with our attachment. Attachment is the motor that drives all of us. And then when it doesn't get what it wants, because it's like this junkie in us, like I said, then that's what anger is. But anger manifests in different levels. But let's just look at the attachment. So the level of attachment we have to start controlling at this level of practice is the obvious one. Attachment to because we're so hungry all the time. Attachment is like emotional hunger, and it's based on a deeper level of attachment, which is like dissatisfaction. So why we're always dissatisfied? I don't have enough. Well, I'm going to get some food, then I'll get some sleep, then I'll stand up, then I'll go here, then I'll get a boyfriend, then I'll get a new handbag, then I'll do this, and I'll change that, then I'll get a job. We never stop, always looking for something out there, driven by this emotional hunger, thinking when I get that, I'll get happy. That's the assumption of attachment. And Buddha questions it hugely and says it's a misconception. So anyway, at this level of practice, we control that level of attachment. Don't eat 49 pieces of cake. Control yourself. You control your body, your speech, and your mind. And why would you do this? Because that makes a happy person. You give up being a junkie, basically. Attachment is a junkie mind, never satisfied, always want something more. And as you know, as Buddha says, and my mother used to say it when it comes to food when I was a kid, the more you get, the more you want. This is the suffering of attachment. We all kind of know it, but we're junkies. We're locked in it. So now, when we get more advanced and we get onto the Bodhisattva path, they start to tell us about these subtler levels of attachment. You read any Tibetan Buddhist literature, you've heard about the 8 worldly dharmas, this strange phrase, And basically, it's just describing an attachment at a more pervasive level, at a more fundamental level. And how it drives everything we think and do and say. And it's in every sentient being, even the nice people. We've also got the virtues, love and kindness and compassion. They're our saving grace. But this attachment is primordial. So when we start to see it, we will realize it's the main source of our pain in daily life. As this person's saying, how do you stop searching for people's approval? It's so gross. It's so evident. They call it attachment to approval, attachment to reputation. But basically, it's putting it in really simple terms. We're driven, since we're born, by this craving to be seen as a nice girl. We're craving to be seen by others. So we can discuss a little bit why, and that's because of the root delusion, ego grasping, this powerful misconception that in Buddhist view is actually even what has caused us in the first place over all these eons of lifetimes to be a separate person. That sounds pretty abstract to us, but this sense of being separate, this sense of concrete, solid, separate me. Well, this attachment to how I'm seen by others is the main energy of that, because we're separate. And the irony of attachment is it makes us feel like I'm miserable. It's the symptom. Attachment is the symptom of a very unhappy person. I mean, join the universe, people. This is why we all suffer. This is Buddha's point, because we don't feel I'm enough. So the energy of attachment is dissatisfaction. I am not enough. I am not good enough. I am not beautiful enough. I am not intelligent enough. I don't have enough. However much my boyfriend tells me he loves me, it's never enough. So we're this bottomless pit of dissatisfaction. And this is the irony of ego in Buddhism. Irony of ego is we're nothing. We feel like we're nothing. The stronger this dissatisfaction, the bigger our attachment, the more emotionally hungry we are. So it's obvious we crave something out there to verify myself, to make me feel I'm a real person. And the deepest, most primordial is to have someone else say, oh, Robina, you're a lovely person, to look at me, to pay attention to me, to listen to me. And that's the attachment to being seen and heard by others. That's the attachment to approval. It's the deepest mental disease we have all got. And it's the hardest to see, because there's obviously, if I'm hungry for you to approve of me, the assumption has to be that I don't think I'm enough. So the Buddha says, I'm sorry, people, you are enough. You just have to realize it. But we rely upon others. That's the basis of all our relationships on the planet. It's a relationship over eons of time of our sexual one, of husband and wife and babies and a family. Animals have it. Humans have it. What do you think's created that? It's this hunger to be seen by another, to be approved of by another. So, of course, there's a good side. We're human beings. We have a human heart. We want to be loved. It's necessary for a mother to praise the child. There's no question. That's so necessary. But we have to learn as we develop to distinguish between, as I say in my relationship, I've got lots of attachment to my boyfriend, mainly attachment, which is how we mostly are. And that means I'm demanding that he praise me, give me things, love me, touch me, approve of me, smile at me every second. I mean, look when we're first in love. And the second he doesn't give me this perfect attention, look how shattered we are. That's the real depths of the attachment to approval. That's the main thing, I think, even more than sex. Once the sex is gone, I think the greatest pain in a relationship is when he stops looking at you, he stops noticing you. That's when we're so devastated. Forget the sex. That's just a sign of it. It's the being approved of. We're so hungry for it. And this is our worst pain. This is the source of our greatest suffering. So, honey, keep practicing is my simple answer to you. Because the logic is, I mean, it's so bizarre, actually, you know, especially if your relationship. Okay, he says it work mostly, and Sangmo says it. Hello, Sangmo. So he says it at work. Okay, fine, work. You see, it's very tricky because if you say, well, don't care what people think, then you think you become kind of completely like autistic and nihilistic. Oh, I don't care what people think. I'll do what I like. That's not what's being said. It's much more than that. But the point is, as we begin to practice, we learn what we're doing by giving up attachment is we are verifying ourself. And that means we're getting self-confidence. We understand that term, low self-esteem and self-confidence. Well, self-confidence in Buddhism comes as and when you give up attachment. In other words, when you give up attachment, you're learning to feed yourself. You become yourself, and you know you're good at your job. You know what you can do. You know who you are, and you are content with it. So that's what self-confidence is. So when you've got that, not arrogance, when you've got self-confidence, it means you don't have much attachment. It means you're becoming a whole person. So then at work, you know what you can do. You know your job, but if you realize your boss doesn't see it, you can't fight. And if your boss doesn't see your qualities and doesn't use your qualities, then you've got to think twice about being at that job. But if a person sees your qualities and encourages you, that's marvelous. But mostly for us is we want our friends to like us. And every second of the day, we're watching other people, how they're responding to us. And that's why we're always adjusting our thoughts and adjusting our behavior to get people to like us. This is our greatest pain. It's our greatest suffering, you know. It's very interesting. Does that answer, Sangmo? Just nod. Yes? Good. But it's not easy, honey. And you've got to start at the beginning and just work every day. So giving up attachment is the key to success as being a Buddhist. And the result of that is you become a whole person. Right now, we're like, Lama Yeshe would often say, we're all schizophrenic, kind of split off from ourselves. It's a good way of putting it. And that's because of attachment. It's much more subtle than we would imagine, this word. It's so profound, you know. Because when you give up attachment and give up anger and give up jealousy, and you become more loving and more kind, but you become more fulfilled, more content, more whole in yourself, more satisfied. And then if people see you, it's a bonus, but you're not hungry for it all the time. It's very powerful. Okay, what else? Now, what actions lead to financial well-being is the first part of the question. It was all written in one sentence. That's the first part. Well, it's obvious. You know, let's look now at karma, the 4 different ways that karma ripens. Excuse me, I have to blow my nose. Excuse me, wait. Well, when we understand the way karma ripens, and there's 4 different ways in our life, it's very helpful to really comprehend why things happen in our life. And it's really quite practical, you know. So the first way our karma ripens, as we talked, is the type of body we get. So we got a human body. It's like we won the lottery. We did really. It's hard work that we did. And we realize how hard we must have worked in a past life in morality, living in vows of non-killing. This is the cause of getting a human body. So we should be so blissed out, you know. So mainly the cause of having a human life as opposed to a dog life or an ant life, a body, is not harming in general, but specifically not killing, because not killing is the most powerful way of non-harming, okay? And the way to do that is to live in vows of non-killing. So powerful. The way the Buddha teaches, vows to not kill and not steal, etc., are so potent. They're in your mind all the time. And Lama Zopa says, when you're living in a vow not to kill, as opposed to merely not killing sometimes, you're ticking over virtuous karma of not killing 24 hours a day in your mind. And you're putting atomic bombs under the tendencies to kill. And let's face it, look at the human realm, look at animals, they live by killing because they're living in fear and, so much fear. But most humans kill something. I mean, look at it. Most humans, and certainly in science, and certainly most religions say it's okay to kill certain people, certain creatures, but Buddha would say, don't kill anybody. No one wants to be harmed. No one wants to die. And we want to develop the habit to not want to harm any living being. We are the beneficiary of that. So that's just to get a human body. But the second way, for example, non-killing would ripen is next level of karma in this life is you got a body. Hitler has your Mr. Stalin has one as a body, and whatever your saints are, let's say Mother Teresa, I know she's not Russian, but she has a body too. So what's the difference? Their mind. So that's the second way your karma ripens, is all your mental tendencies. It's very simple, your mental tendencies. And we can deduce by Mr. Stalin's behavior that he had pretty heavy duty mental tendencies. And we can deduce by Mother Teresa's behavior that she had nice mental tendencies. So the first kind of karma is called the fully ripened result, the type of birth you get. The second one is called your intentions or tendencies similar to the cause. So look at your personality. You didn't get it from your mother. She might share these qualities, but you didn't get them from her. You brought them with you yourself from having practiced them before. So now one of these, now let's look at this one from the question. Let's say you got a human body, which is the result of, say, non-killing. But in your mind, you've got a tendency to be very miserly. You've got a tendency not to like giving things. You've got a tendency to be miserly, to not want to give things, in particular, not giving money. We can see that. We can see certain people have that tendency in the mind. That's the second way karma ripens. It's called the tendencies similar to the cause. Now, the third kind of karma, that's you go out a bit from yourself, and now we see we're very social beings, aren't we? We live among sentient beings. We've got mummies and daddies and aunties and uncles and friends and neighbors and enemies and dogs and rats and cockroaches. We've got we live in a community. We live among sentient beings. So now the third way our karma ripens, it's called our experiences similar to the cause. In here, these are called the tendencies similar to the cause, which is your habit of having done them before. You wake up in this life with that tendency. And we're using the example here of a tendency to be mean. And you might notice it in your own mind or other people. Even, maybe your mother didn't teach you. I mean, this is how it is. You've got habits in your mind that you bring with you. Now, the third way that karma ripens, as I said, is your experiences similar to the cause. So this is how you're treated by others, how the world impacts upon you. So this is now let's say the result of, so the habit to not give is coming from the habit of not being generous, of being miserly. But there's another, so how that ripens as an experience is you'll never make any money. You'll get born in a poor country. No matter how many jobs you have, you can never make ends meet. You lose your job. No matter, you can't get the right amount of money. You can't get your resources, and not just money. You can't get any resources. So this is why they say, we need non-killing to get a human body. But in order to have a decent life where you're born in a situation where you can have good conditions and get a job easily. And most of us, even we're not living on the street, perhaps some of us are living on the street. So, but we've got a house, we have a mattress, we have friends, we have a job, money coming in the bank every month. That's from generosity. That's literally from generosity. But also including there by also the habit to not steal. So if you've got lots of generosity habit in your mind and you have lots of not stealing from the past life, that will ripen as an experience of always having what you need. But this is the point now. One, you might be born in this life to a very rich family. That's from your past actions of being generous. But in this life, due to your other habit from another time, you've got the lack of generosity. So you can have a mind. We can all see this. Rich people aren't necessarily generous, but they're rich because of their past generosity. But in this life, they're really mean, or they steal, or they lie, and they don't want to give anything. So that's also from past habits. So the habit you have now is from past lives, and your experiences that you have now are from past lives. Equally, you can have a person who's really generous, who never steals, but has the karma from past stealing and lack of generosity to be born in a poor place and not even find a grain of rice to eat. So your experiences is from one lot of karma. This is the stuff that happens to you that gives you your present conditions. And the other one is your own tendencies. So I hope that explains. And the fourth way karma ripens is called environmental result. Just the way the physical world. So we use the example of killing, so non-killing or killing. So we've got a human body because of non-killing. We wake up in this life, let's say some of us used to kill maybe, and now we've decided we're Buddhists, we're not killing. That's a tendency. The third one, the result of non-killing, is you won't get killed and you won't die young. So far we've got that one, haven't we? But look at the people at the moment with COVID-19. That's their karma from past killing, that they're dying young or getting killed. But the fourth one we're all experiencing, you know, the environmental karmic result of non-killing, of killing, is that is the physical world itself harms us. People who have allergies, a person eats peanuts and they die, you know. You live in a place where the water's polluted, where the air's polluted, where the food is bad quality. Or in this case, look, we can't even touch our own sister or our boyfriend because we might get COVID-19 and die. So that's environmental karma, and the whole world is experiencing that. That's from environmental karma from many lifetimes ago, and that's in this case with sickness like COVID-19. It's both the one, if you die yourself, the experience similar to the cause, and then the fourth kind of karma, the environmental result. We all got that one from past killing in countless lifetimes ago. So I hope that explains the first part of this person's question. And the second part is, how do you create the causes for not being lonely? It's exactly related to my question, to my answer to Sangmo. It's attachment to reputation. Think about this. Analyze what you mean by lonely. Okay, there's two things. One is not having many people in your life. That doesn't mean you're lonely. But some people can be, so then the other one is, what is lonely? Think about this. Analyze this. It's very powerful. I say I'm lonely because I can't share, I have no one to share my thoughts with. So you have to analyze. This is right back to the same point about attachment to reputation, attachment to being approved of. In other words, with all this attachment now, this dissatisfaction we have with this low self-esteem, I feel that my thoughts and my experiences have no value. They only begin to have value when I can share them with someone else. We don't analyze it. I mean, it does feel marvelous to be loved by somebody, to be seen by somebody. That's when people bliss out, when they fall in love, when they've been lonely and suddenly some boy sees them and gives them all this care and attention. It's marvelous. It's good to be loved. But what we're not noticing is this huge attachment that before, when you weren't getting that attention, you felt you were nothing. And that's why you felt lonely. Now someone's listening to you and loving you, and suddenly you found heaven. But, you know, it's coming from attachment, because he will leave you. He will die. And then you're lonely again. So the only way to give up being lonely is to learn to love yourself. It's the only way to say it. Learn to give up attachment. No, you are of value. You are who you are. We don't have to have the craving all the time for someone else to hear my thoughts. But you check in our own head. That's all we're ever doing. We're always telling our experiences to somebody else. You know, you're at work and you've got a boyfriend at home, and you're at work and something happens. All you're doing in the car or on the bus all the way home, you're telling your boyfriend all about things. That's the craving we have of attachment. We don't, you know, we assume we have to share our thoughts. We have to share our experiences. There's a good side to that, but it's got to come from compassion. But it's, for most of us, it's coming from this huge emotional need to be seen and heard and approved of by others. And indeed, loneliness is one of the greatest sufferings in this world, you know, people who don't have family and connections, but we don't know how to look at our own minds. That's why we're lonely, you know. What is the safe way of wishing? What? from material resources. Well, everything, okay, we have to learn, karma is like the nuts and bolts of why things happen. You get, if you want to get rich, you've got to have generosity karma from the past. If you want to not be poor, you've got to have no stealing karma and have generosity. So you've got to practice those habits. But the point is, your motivation for doing it is the main thing. So, you've got to wish. The intention is one of the most fundamental states of mind. It's there every second. And it's I will, I want, I wish. As Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. So to just want money for its own sake is based on attachment. So that will not bring any result. It'll just bring suffering. So nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with having beautiful boyfriends and divine babies and gorgeous houses. Nothing wrong with it. But the only way to make it a valid experience for us is we've got the motivation has to be renunciation, emptiness, or bodhicitta. This is the classic Buddhist way of putting it. If it's just attachment, you destroy it. You destroy it. If you just have lots of it, from past life, let's say you've been generous, and in this life you've got lots of money, but in your mind, you're mean and miserly and full of attachment and greed. All you're doing, you're using this money, but you're turning it into dust. Next life, or even soon in this life, you will end up with nothing because it's driven by attachment. So if you do want money, maybe this life, it might be too late. Maybe the karma for you to be poor is so strong. It's the same. It's like anything. Two people can be sick with cancer, both due to killing in a past life. They both go to the same doctor. One person gets healed and one doesn't, because the karma for that cancer was much stronger than the other person. Their karma was able to be shifted. So nothing is permanent. So maybe you're poor now, and you do want money, marvelous, but want it for the right reason. Want it because you want to become a more happy person, a more wise person, so you can be a benefit to the world. Otherwise, it's just poison. It becomes poison, Yeah, to have good car, beautiful clothes, gorgeous husbands, divine things. Why not? It's all the result of virtue. But now wanting it, not because of attachment. You've got to practice that. And the point is, if we're really practicing on our mind, they have a saying, the yogis have a saying up in the mountains, yogis, the meditators, they say, if you're really practicing, the food will roll up the hill to you. So you've got to factor in your past karma. So due to your past karma, maybe it's very hard for you to get money. Maybe you live in a place where you can never get a job. Even if you work 80 hours a week, you still can't make ends meet. That's from your past miserliness and past lack of generosity. So all you can do is change that now, trying to be generous, changing your mind, want to have a generous mind, and treat money with incredible respect. Do not cheat at all. This reminds me, when I was in Russia, I think it was in Moscow in 2003, I think. And I was giving refuge in the lay vows. And one of the lay vows is to not steal, we know that, and to not lie, right? And most people take those vows. But I remember among the people who were taking it, there was a serious discussion, because apparently you guys don't like paying taxes because you think your government cheats you, and they might, I don't know. And so therefore you lie about your income and then you steal because you don't pay your taxes. So I remember the people who were taking refuge talked about this very seriously. And then when it came to taking the 5 vows, when it came to stealing and lying, there was complete silence. Nobody took them. None of you laugh. You're supposed to laugh at that. That's supposed to be funny. You're not laughing at me. Never mind. You didn't hear the joke. Did you hear me properly, Diana? I was talking about Moscow people. You people. Now, some people are laughing, okay? I hear it's different now. So anyway, you've got to be totally moral with money. Do not cheat. Be very sincere. Pay, best you can. You might have a corrupt government. I don't know what to say about your taxes. That's your business. But you've got to really be clear about it. I know in like in America or Australia, where the big thing is everybody gets credit cards, and then you owe too much money and you just say, oh, well, I'll just be bankrupt. And you steal. People think, oh, it doesn't matter. The bank doesn't care. They're rich. That's not the point. You've got to watch your mind like a hawk. You've got to want to be totally sincere with things. You want to develop a generous habit. You want to not steal. You want to not cheat. It's really important. It's mental, You got to change your behavior, change your habits. Be very sincere, very honest, very ethical. Because you are the result of it. You're the product. You're the beneficiary of your ethics, right? Yeah, of course, there's such a karma of like a group. Of course, there's of course, in each individual being in the universe, and there are trillions of them, each of them is programming their own mind with their own habits, every one of them. And each of them will get their own results. But we can see, can't we, that we also experience results in groups. So one of the karmic results, the experience is similar to the cause of, say, stealing. I'll get born in a country or in a family or in a place where there's just no resources. You'll have nothing, you know. There'll be no ability, no way to make money. So that's group karma. That's, you know, collective karma. COVID-19 right now is collective karma for millions and millions of people. Some of them will get it, but the environmental one is collective for everybody. Some people have, you know, you live in a place where the water is very pure, but one person, and the food is delicious, and that's a result of non-killing in the past. So that's the collective karma of virtue, that everything is delicious. You know, you're born in a place where it's easy to get a job. That's the collective karma. A family is collective karma. A group, a race, you know, a certain race of people in a certain situation. You know, due to some past karma, you're born into a race that's considered more superior. I mean, that's all rubbish, it's arrogance, but that's the way karma ripens. If you're born sometimes into a particular group of people that's seen as very low, that's the fruit of karma as well. Absolutely. It's collective karma, they call it. But not our ancestors, no. That's not like that. It's more karma from past lives, not from your ancestors in this life, you know. Because in last life, you could have been an Australian, and in this life, you're Russian. So who cares what your Russian ancestors did? That's something to do with your mind. That's all the questions, and it's now a whole hour. So there we go. We've talked about a few things and probably got more questions from the questions now. Okay. What did we talk about? I don't know. So mainly the questions seem to be about karma. And there's attachment. Attachment to reputation is a very powerful one, I tell you. It's something that's very hard to see, I think, this attachment. If there are any more questions, please tell me, by the way, because there's nothing wrong with questions. Are there any more questions?
Hello, Venerable Robina.
Hello,
my name is Kasia. We met in Findhorn many times before. So anyway, I'm going to translate Russian questions into English because it's easier for Diana. She doesn't have to switch between channels. So she asked me
Wonderful.
to do that.
Okay, Katya, go on.
Yeah, anyway, so the first question is, if the subtlest mind goes to the Pure Land, Sukhavati, then what kind of mind is actually staying in Bardo before that?
Okay, I've got to explain what that means then. You see, there's different types of rebirths. So, you know, within samsara, you've got the karma to be born as a human, let's say, or an animal, for example. There's two options. There's many more, but let's say two. So there's 6 realms of existence Buddha talks about, you know, 6 realms of existence within samsara. And there are some that result of a lot of virtue, and there's some that are a result of a lot of non-virtue. So the humans and gods, the God realm is a bit similar to what Christians call heaven, but in Buddhism, it's a real realm. And you've got a subtle light body, everything's very radiant, very blissful, good environmental karma, good experiences, good mental, good everything. It's a fruit of lots of virtue. Then you've got a human body, which the Buddhists would say is the best one to get because you mightn't be such a happy one, you know, but you've got lots of opportunity to practice using our intelligence. We can change our mind. Then you've got animals and spirits and others, more suffering. But there's another type of rebirth that's usually only for those who are highly realized spiritual practitioners. If you've realized emptiness and got bodhicitta, you know, you're going to be born in what they call a pure land. So I need to explain this, okay? So to understand that, what a pure land is, we have to understand what a Buddha is. So the word Buddha is referring actually to the enlightened mind. So when you're fully enlightened, everybody can be, you don't need a body anymore. You don't need to be reborn. You don't need environments. You don't need any gross anything. Your mind is totally pure. You're completely wise. You've got infinite compassion. Your consciousness pervades the universe because consciousness is not physical. That's the Buddha's mind. All knowing, all compassionate, all wise, all pervasive mind. But a person becomes a Buddha driven by incredible compassion to help others. So once you become a Buddha, you don't just sit there thinking, you know, all you want to do is help others. So because we can't communicate with the Buddha at that level, we can't possibly. So then the Buddha, out of compassion, manifests in bodies to help us. And there's two main kinds. So one kind is the one that looks like us. So Shakyamuni Buddha, this person 2,500 years ago, or if you like, you can talk about the Dalai Lama. Anybody, all the Buddhists say he is the Buddha. Okay, he won't say he's the Buddha because he's being humble. But if he is the Buddha, then he doesn't need a human body for his own side. He doesn't need a human body. He has chosen out of his total power to manifest in a human body so that we can see him and hear him, because we can't communicate with subtle mind, not possible. So he manifests in a body looking like us. That's Shakyamuni Buddha of 2,500 years ago, and that's anybody who's a Buddha now. You can't tell. All the lamas will say he is the Buddha. I don't know if he is, but they say he is. So let's say if he is the Buddha, he doesn't need that human body. He doesn't need a human body. He's chosen to be reborn. He went consciously to that mother's womb out of choice, only in order to help sentient beings. So that's what a Buddha does. That's one kind of body, one that you and I can see. Now there's another kind of body that the Buddha would manifest in that only the highly realized bodhisattvas can see in their meditation. Those who've realized emptiness, who've accessed their own subtle mind, whose minds are much more powerful, they can cognize Buddha at a subtler level with a body of light. So all the deities we see, if we look at the Vajrayana literature, all the different deities, Tara, Chenrezig, all the thousands of them, they're all Buddha mind manifesting in this subtle light body. And those pictures and statues are just depictions of this subtle light body, of the bodhisattvas can see directly. So by meditating on those different Buddhas, that's how we create the cause to become that Buddha. So those Buddhas then, they live in an environment, and that environment is called a Pure Land. And of course, this is a level of reality that we can't even relate to. We can't see it with our eyes because we're human and our mind is too gross. But as we progress spiritually, we will have the ability with our subtle mind to cognize Buddhas at that level in a more subtle form with their subtle environment. And so the high beings can be reborn in that environment where they can become a Buddha very, very quickly. So there's one, the question Katya asked, you mentioned the question, there's one called Sukhavati, which is the Pure Land of a Buddha called Amitabha. All the thousands of Buddhas, which are different manifestations of different qualities of the mind, that's all. Amitabha Buddha, Lama Zopa talks about this in his book about death. He says that it's the only one where ordinary people who've got delusions, who haven't got high realizations, can be born. So the main cause is the wanting to be reborn in Amitabha's Pure Land, the wanting to be reborn there. So that when you practice morality, you practice virtue, you live in your vows, you have bodhicitta, and you have aspiration every day. And then when you die, due to your virtuous karma, you might or might not get reborn at that level with a more subtle light body in a subtle environment where you can hear teachings day and night. No need for toilets and food and sleep and boyfriends because you haven't got a gross body. There's no gross delusions at all. And you can become enlightened very quickly, and then based on bodhicitta, so then you can come back to the human realm and help others. Did that answer the question, Katya? Do you think?
Oh, well, it wasn't my question. I was just
I know that.
translating.
I understand that.
Well, I hope so.
Well, based on the question. So tell me the question again.
The question was, if the subtlest mind goes to the Pure Land Sukhavati, then what kind of mind is actually staying in Bardo before that? So
well,
that was the question.
That's so whether it's, so that means, like I said before, the process is this, that person who aspired in that life to be born in Amitabha's Pure Land, who created the cause to be born there by practicing morality, living in their vows, practicing bodhicitta, realizing emptiness, or thinking about emptiness, really leading a really good life, and the karmic connection was there. So exactly the same for that person. When they started the death process, the karmic seed to be born in Amitabha's Pure Land would have been triggered before they stopped breathing. So that's all. And then that mind would have gone through the pure intermediate state, and then when the time was right, they would then take birth in the Amitabha's Pure Land. Exactly the same way whether you're going to be born as a dog or a human. The karmic seed is triggered before you stop breathing. Then when you die, you go into an intermediate state, and then you take the rebirth that you'd already programmed in your mind. It's the same thing, just the same. So I'm sure that answers the question. Any more there, Katya?
Yeah. So the next question is it possible to practice Buddhism and enjoy our ordinary life at the same time?
Well, that's like asking me, is it possible to practice tennis and also have other things in my life? Okay, if you want to be like, if you want to be like Federer, that Swiss dude, you know it's not possible. If you want to be like Federer, if you want to be the best tennis player on the planet and win all the Wimbledon and all the other big tests, then you have to sacrifice so many things. You've got to practice 8, 10, 12 hours a day. You know that. You know perfectly well. If you want to be the best concert pianist, I know at the moment I'm captivated on YouTube by this little Russian guy. He's been playing piano since he's like 3 or 4. I can't think of his name. He's a total genius. He came into this world with incredible tendency to play piano. He's got this YouTube channel. He's unbelievable. He's like 9 now. He's a genius. So I don't think he's going to be doing much else. Can I be like that little Russian pianist who plays piano all day and have an ordinary life? It's most unlikely. So it's all a question. The question is, how much level of Buddhism do you want to practice? If you want to become a Buddha in this life, you better give up sex, drugs, rock and roll quickly and rush off to the mountains, okay? But you got to practice day and night to get there. So it's a question of level of practice, degree of practice. Because there's no contradiction between life and Buddhism. If there is, it's schizophrenic. But it's a question of how seriously you want to practice. That's the answer. It's how seriously you want to practice. It's up to you. If you want to play tennis once a week, then you can do that, but you won't become like Federer. If you want to play the piano once a week, then you're not going to become like this little Russian little boy who plays like a genius, So that's the answer. It's a question of degree. And of course, having the wisdom to understand what practice means. Because whether you want to become Federer or play tennis once a week, whether you want to become a Buddha this life or do it in 50 lives, you've still got to do the same thing, but at a slower pace. There's no shortcut. You've got to give up attachment, give up anger, give up delusions as best you can within the life. The quickest way to do that is to give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll altogether and then go become a monk or a nun and go to the mountains and get some realizations. That's the quickest way to do it. But you've got to do it no matter what. So whether you play tennis once a week or every day, 8 hours a day, you've still got to do backhands and forehands. It's a question of degree and a question of intensity of practice. That's all. What else?
So next question is from Anna, but it was already in English. And honestly, I didn't get it, but I hope I'll just read it for you. So how can you tell if a situation is simply an obstacle or karma? For instance, when do you know how to give up on something you may wish to achieve?
I understand. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So if you could argue that every time something negative happens, 1, it is due to karma, and 2, it is an obstacle. So by definition, negative karma ripening is an obstacle. So in other words, if you've got so much virtuous karma of generosity, let's say from past lives, you don't even have to do anything for money to come pouring into your lap. So that means there's no obstacles because your generosity karma is so strong. But if you've got some negative karma from non-generosity, then you might not get that job. Your money might get stolen. So you've got to purify the obstacle. So by definition, negative karma ripening is itself an obstacle. Of course it is. That's what it is. And that's exactly the point. And that's what practice consists of, is getting over those obstacles, isn't it? Persevering. I hope that's clear. What's next?
The next question is, how can you deal with your fears and anxiety? So that's the first part of the question.
Can you give me the whole question?
And the second one is, well, it's not connected. Well, it's kind of connected.
Okay,
yeah. So what should one's view on the army forces be from the Buddhist point of view?
The armies.
Yeah, army force.
Well, I mean, the answer to the first question is every word I've been saying. Is just to start practice. I mean, what we do is we take our particular problem right now, and someone just mentioned anxiety, And then you say, can you please give me the solution to anxiety? And another person will say, well, can you please give me the solution to anger? Then another person will say, can you please give me the solution to not wanting to be approved of at work? In the end, they're just different isolated examples of the pervasive problem we all have of suffering. And Buddha's answer is the whole path. So it's sort of like one person asks me, how do you hit a backhand? Another person says, how do I hit a forehand? Another person says, how do I hold the ball when I do a serve? There are specific techniques, but the broader one is you've got to find a good tennis coach and learn all of them, because the answer, all of those answers will come from that teacher who'll show you all of the things. So it's all a question of one step at a time, you know. And the other way to answer that question is our problem is we only notice the anxiety or the anger or the depression when it's fully developed. We don't notice when it's mild because we don't pay attention. And that's the problem. That I used the analogy before, I'm sure. That's a bit like asking me, I'm driving at 160 kilometers an hour on the freeway, and suddenly my wheels are falling off. What should I do? The question's like that. So the implication in that question is that you never heard of car mechanics. Because if you knew about car mechanics, if you had methods to work on your mind every day, you would not even get to the point of having anxiety attacks or depression or anger. Now, this sounds shocking to us because we just think they're normal, and they are normal, but we only experience these levels of emotion that we have because we haven't known about techniques to work on our mind before the wheels fall off. If you had a good mechanic from day one, the wheels will not fall off your car. That's a fact. And I'm talking about the emotional wheels here. We don't work on our minds at a subtler level. We wait until the dramas happen. We wait till we're paralyzed by depression or anxiety or anger. And then we say, oh, I'd better do something about it. So the big answer is we've got to start working on our mind today. That's it. No shortcut. Start learning today. Control your body, control your speech, read the Buddhist teachings, go to classes, do meditation every day, and slowly, 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 you're learning how to deal with your mind. And when we really advance, we'll be able to deal with our mind before it becomes severe. That's the big point that Buddha's making. That's the benefit of a daily practice. And anxiety, when we analyze it, anxiety is just a mild level of aversion. Aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. If we're getting everything we want every day, by definition, we wouldn't be anxious. We'd be all happy and excited. But because attachment isn't getting what it wants, and we're seeing problems and dramas are happening, and the husband's not doing the right thing, and the kids are wrong, and we're worried about the politics, everything seems to be going wrong, that's the only time anxiety comes. Well, anxiety is a mild level of anger. Some people rage and kick and scream when things go wrong. That's evident. But we've got mild versions of aversion, and aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants, when the nice things stop happening. So some people call it anxiety, worry, you know. It's just milder level of aversion, or frustration, annoyance, irritation. These are milder levels of aversion. And aversion is what happens when attachment stops getting what it wants. And attachment is a junkie that only wants the nice things. We only want the politics to be perfect, everybody to be perfect, everything to be delicious, the sun to be shining exactly when we want it, all the money to be there when we want it. Attachment is a junkie that only wants everything to be nice, and we can't handle it when things aren't nice. And that's when aversion or anger or annoyance or irritated or anxiety or frustration or despair and depression manifest. So we understand the analysis, it can help us learn to practice. And it takes time. It's no magic pill. It takes time. You can't become Federer overnight. What else?
So what about the army? So
say the exact question, how she said it.
Yeah, so what should one's view on the army forces be from the Buddhist point of view?
Okay, all right. Well, the very first level of practice, like I said, junior school, entry level, grade 1 in Buddhism is don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't harm sentient beings. So individuals take on that decision according to their own will, their choice, and they do not want to kill, do not want to steal, do not want to lie. And this is the fundamental kind of view that Buddha has, that if we live a life of not harming, that everything we want will come in the future. If you don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, don't harm, and live a life of morality and virtue, when you die, you will get every single result you want. You'll live in a peaceful environment. No one will try to kill you. You'll be healthy. You'll have money. You'll have a job. Because non-harming is the cause of getting what we want in the future. So if we want, first is individual for a start, then you would want to not kill. So, I'm just at the moment working on the biography of one of our amazing lamas, Geshe Lama Kontrok, was a great meditator. And it's describing from some of his monks at the monastery at the time when the Tibetan business happened in 1950, when the Chinese communists invaded Tibet. And then by 59, there was this great uprising. The Dalai Lama escaped. Hundreds of thousands of Tibetans were killed. And so he's describing. So those monks in the monasteries were the ones there was no thought for them to go and join the army. It wouldn't even have arisen in their mind. It's not a possibility. They realized it's due to past karma that their country's being invaded. There's the Chinese army, the People's Liberation Army coming in and slaughtering their people. But it wouldn't be they'd sit there being all holy. Oh, I must not kill in return. It just wouldn't arise in their mind. It would be foolish. There's no way they're going to kill. There's no way they're going to kill anybody. There's no way they're going to join the army. Now, the interesting point was some of the monks did. So you could argue here now, at the next level of practice, the bodhisattva path, this is another whole discussion. The bodhisattva path is, bodhisattva is a person, if you are a bodhisattva, you're this very highly realized being who has practiced all the junior school level, has controlled their body, speech, and mind, is living in vows, now has developed this incredible love and compassion, and therefore bodhicitta, the wish only to benefit others. So if you're at that level, you can kill, you can lie, because it's coming totally only from a pure motivation. Now, maybe we don't believe that's a possibility, but that certainly is a possibility. You have such compassion. So it's possible that you could join an army, but it would be purely out of compassion. And this is a big difference here. It wouldn't just be compassion for your people. Right now, most countries have an army, and and people talk about it in very noble terms, oh, you're defending your country. Well, I mean, that's not very compassionate. The usual reason people have an army is to defend my people so I can kill those people. Well, that's not virtue. That's not compassion. So to join an army for that reason is just completely absurd. It's just called anger, So from a point of view of being a Buddhist at this first level and you have vows, of course you wouldn't. And this is exactly why the Dalai Lama, all these 60 years, anybody who can hear him talk, he has never, ever once talked about fighting the Chinese back. This is exactly the reason. Because what's the point? I forget the bodhisattva path now. Just go back to the original part. But that's the one that the world needs to see. There's no benefit in killing. The Buddhist view from the point of view of karma, if the Tibetans rise up and have an army and then destroy the Chinese, they would have satisfied their need. They would have chucked the Chinese out of their country. But next life, even worse, because that's the result of all the killing. So from the long-term point of view of abiding by the laws of karma, there's no thought to kill. You would never want to do it. Now, as I'm saying, on at the bodhisattva level, it is a possibility because your mind is so pure, and you would do it for the sake not just of your people, but even for the sake of the others, So there's another whole discussion. So how to think about an army in a country? Well, then, the result, what is an army? Just at a simple level, karmically, people who join an army have a karma to kill, obviously. You've got a tendency, you look up the jobs in the newspaper, you look up which are the jobs. Oh, the army, I think I'll join the army. If you've got no karma to kill, you would never take that job. There's no way, So an army is the manifestation karmically of a particular group of people of your past negativity. You can say it that way. But at the same time, you can still, I remember seeing pictures of the Dalai Lama, because the Indian government, when he lives in Dharamsala, the Indian government provides, and everywhere he goes, all the governments provide a police or army protection for him. And you see him, he's always so kind. They're the guys in India with their guns on their shoulder, and His Holiness is always very sweet and kind to them. So it's like, also you can see it, if you want to have a pure view of an army, it's to defend. Nothing wrong, having compassion. So there's a mixture of answers to that. I hope it helps. What else?
Okay, next question is, Buddha taught to check the teachings for yourself and not just to follow it with blind faith. How do you check if rebirth exists?
How do you check one?
if rebirth exists. Rebirth.
Oh, that's easy. How do I check whether E equals MC squared? Who's asked that question, please? Where's that person? Are they there? I need to have a discussion with them.
No, it is from YouTube. Sorry, it is
Okay.
possible to have a discussion.
Yeah, sorry, it's from YouTube. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, the person. Well, I have to imagine you're debating with me, so I'll be both voices. So I'll ask you a question. How can I prove that E equals MC squared, just like Einstein tells me? Well, it's obvious how I prove it. I have to study. And I've got to start with 1 + 1 is 2. I've got to go to junior school math. Then I go to next level. Then I go to high school. Then I go to university. Then I start to study physics. That's how I can prove that it's right or that it's wrong. So either way, our trouble is when we call it science in our culture, we tend to say, oh, it's science. Somebody has proved it. Well, somebody has proved E equals MC squared. Somebody has proved that 1 + 1 is 2. But if you haven't proved it, it's not science for you, it's blind belief. So I have blind faith in E equals MC squared. There's enough people out there who show they've proved it, so it gives me confidence. But until I have proven it, it's not real knowledge for me. Well, it's exactly how you prove rebirth. Buddha is not a creator. He is like Einstein. As I always quote this, it's very interesting. In New Zealand, years ago, one scientist, in fact, in a group of teachings, he asked me the question, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? Now, this is a really major point because that's what we think of as religion, isn't it? It's revelation from on high. And the assumption with religion is that you can't prove it. That's why you have to have blind faith. Now, if you posit a creator, I accept that. You can't prove that the creator is true. That's impossible because creator by definition is the source of the universe. So that's why you have to have blind faith and then devotion in God. So that makes sense. So that's why he asked the question. He assumed Buddhism, like any other religion, comes from on high, is made by somebody. So the only approach to it is to have faith in it. That is not the Buddhist view, which is the person what they pointed out. So I said to him, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings about E equals MC squared to him? And everybody laughed, of course, because we would never say that. But this is the interesting point. But it's exactly the same approach. There's not a fraction of difference. See, Buddha is like Einstein insofar as he has used his intelligence, and you've got to remember Buddhism is asserting subtler levels of mind that we do not posit in our culture, much subtler levels of mind that can see things in the past and the future. And you get that when you get single-pointed concentration. But all this is posited in Buddha's teachings. So in exactly the same way that Buddha, every word that Buddha said is what he has proven himself. Every word that Einstein says is exactly what he has observed. He's presented it, and he says, these are my findings. So don't just believe me. He's not asking us to believe him. He's not saying that he's not saying I had a dream about this. Einstein is not saying I had a vision of this. We know he used his own intelligence, but that's exactly the same as the Buddha. And as the Dalai Lama said, if Buddha, basically Einstein saying, I have now discovered that this is how things are. He didn't make it up. He's not a creator of E equals MC squared. He has observed the reality of the universe and used his intelligence, and he's codified these laws, and then he presents them. He basically says, these are my findings. Now, if you want to prove it as well, you follow my steps. Buddha's saying exactly the same thing. Exactly. So like both of those, whether you start learning Buddhism or you start learning physics, it's exactly the same process. The first step has to be that you've got confidence in Einstein as a valid person. You've got confidence in Buddha as a valid person. So you then take it as your working hypothesis, and you start at the beginning and you go each step of the way in a logical, coherent presentation. That's the Buddha's approach. And as the Dalai Lama said, if you check, you go along, let's say you go to Einstein, you check grade 1 and you tick the boxes. Yeah, I prove that's right. Now I get to grade 2. I prove that's right. Now I get to grade 3 and I prove that's right, because that's what learning knowledge means. You go through your exams and you prove it, then you go to the next level. Same with the Buddha. And as the Dalai Lama said, if you move along, taking Buddha's methodology, ticking the boxes each way, proving each, and then you get to a certain point where you prove that Buddha's wrong. Well, of course, you must reject him, exactly the same as Einstein. So it's not a fraction of difference. It's just that we're so habituated with the notion that something like a past life can't be proved. And yes, with scientific knowledge and neuroscientific views, you can't prove it. You've got to take the view of Buddha's that mind has these subtler levels of cognition, which we can all access just by doing a couple of, if you go to the mountains now and get single point of concentration, this technique, you'll prove the past and future lives. You'll be able to see them because you will have accessed your subtle mind. So there's a different series of assumptions here, that's all, but it's exactly the same approach. But most of us just believe it. Most of us just believe in E equals MC squared. Most of us believe most things we're told. We say, oh, it's science. Well, whose science is it? It's not mine. I haven't proven it. So we've got to be more rigorous in our thinking, you know. That's my answer to you. One step at a time. It's either right or it's wrong. It's either true or it's not. And you have to prove it yourself. I would say the big, okay, never mind. That's enough of that. That's enough of that one. Go on, what else? The whole day is questions. How interesting. Go on, Katya.
Yeah, so the next question is it possible to get rid of 8 worldly dharmas, living a life of a lay person, not becoming a monk?
Well, the only way to answer that for you is to know what it means. That means, you know, if you can truly give up attachment to every second, attachment to wanting happy feelings and then not being unhappy when you get unhappy feelings, if you can really give up attachment to getting things and not care if you don't get things, if you can really give up attachment to being praised and don't care if people abuse you, and if you can really give up attachment to being seen as a good person and everybody hates you and you still be happy, then honey, of course you can. That's everybody's job. That's what our job is. And it doesn't follow that a monk is any more qualified than a layperson in this terms, because, you know, some people come into this life with very highly realized minds and can easily do this. So it's a question of what you brought with you from past life and a question of how advanced you are. But it's the same job. Like I said, whether you play tennis once a week or play Wimbledon 8 days a week, you've still got to play tennis. So you've got to do it at your own pace. So it's the same practice, whether you're a monk or a nun or live in the mountains or have 6 wives and 5 children. Go on.
So the last question is it possible to be objectively not ready to a serious practice? Or if you're persistent enough, you can overcome all the obstacles anyway?
I think you have to ask me that question again.
So is it possible to be objectively not ready to a serious practice? Or if you're persistent enough, you can overcome all the obstacles? So that's exactly what was asked. So.
No, I understand. But this is a very grand question. It's all a question of degree. It's like you're asking me, is it possible to be a serious tennis player and overcome all the obstacles and win Wimbledon? Well, of course it is, but you've got to have all the conditions. That means you've got to have the best coach. You've got to have the right kind of body. You've got to have the right amount of money so you can pay your coach. You've got to have enough time to work day and night. So it's all a question of you looking at your life, and it's all the conditions have to be there. You might be rich and have the best coach in the universe, but have no tennis, so not much tendency to play tennis. You might have the best money and the best coach, but only have one leg. So you've got to look at all your conditions. It's a dependent arising. The question is a general question, and the answer, of course, is a general yes. But you personally must look at your life, your conditions, your tendencies, your karmic history, and then you can see what level of practice. I mean, serious, if you're in grade 1, you've got to be serious. Serious doesn't mean you only get serious when you get to grade 12. You've got to start being serious. But if you're in grade 1, that's serious. It's contingent. It's dependent arising. That's my answer. It's very logical, what I'm saying. So you look at your life for yourself and you can see if it's possible. What else?
There is only the comment from YouTube
Yes.
from the person who asked the question about rebirth.
Yes. Yes.
So he said, thank you so much for the answer. My question points to my Catholic origin. So now I realize that.
That's interesting. Yes, very good point. Thank you so much for that. Very good. So, okay, what else? So what do we talk about now then? We've touched on reincarnation, death, karma, the mind, bodhicitta. We've touched on all the main points of the path. We haven't talked about emptiness yet. We touched on that even. So we did all the bullet points. We've done all of that. But I think what I want to talk about is, we might have mentioned this, but because the path, it's like all bodies of knowledge. If it was math or whatever, it's presented in a nice, orderly way. So we all know that when you practice, learning piano, you get to a certain stage in grade 1 and you can pass an exam, and that qualifies you now to go to grade 2, and then you get a certain amount of ability and you tick the boxes and you go to grade 3. But we also all know you don't leave once you get to grade 4. It's not as if you never touch grade 1s, 2 and 3 anymore, because every time you play the grade 1 piece, when you're at grade 4, you play it even better. So when you get to grade 12, can you imagine how good your grade 1 piece is? So your knowledge keeps growing. You don't just leave behind the previous stuff. That's too concrete. You keep bringing the knowledge you brought with you and improving that as you go more deep, as you get more advanced. Well, it's exactly the same with the path to enlightenment. So as we know, the path to enlightenment, if you've got the Tibetan packaging, the lam rim, it's all very structured. You've got junior school. I know I call it that. But if you've read the literature, you've got the first scope, the lowest scope of practice, which is what I call junior school, where you learn about karma and you control your body and speech. There's not even much discussion about the mind yet. You control the servants of your mind. And why would you do this? Because the Buddha is telling us that everything we think and do and say leaves seeds in our mind that will ripen as our future experiences. And this is the beginning of getting some renunciation, renouncing suffering and its causes. It's a powerful level of practice. And then you get to high school, the next level, the middle scope of the lam rim, and this is now the wisdom wing. This is all the work you do on yourself, and you are the beneficiary of this. Your main concern at this level of practice is to control your body, your speech, and your mind. You back off and you don't harm sentient beings. You leave them in peace. This is your main concern at this level. So then you keep moving, you get more control and more subdued in your body, speech, and mind. You become more content, more fulfilled, more well-behaved, if you like. Now you can move to the compassion wing, which is the university level. So here the emphasis is not on you anymore. Now the emphasis is on continuing to practice. That never changes. But now the reason is so you can be a benefit to others. The first one is so you stop harming others and you benefit to yourself. Now the whole emphasis changes. You continue to work on yourself. That never changes. You keep controlling your body. You keep controlling your mind. You keep controlling your speech. That never changes, and you get better and better and better. But now you add to the mix this powerful component of, oh my God, look at the world. We're all in the same boat. And I must continue to work on myself so I can be a benefit to others. So you become more profound. You become more deep in your practice. The practice never changes. You keep getting better at all of it. So one way to talk about this, and this has been implied by several of the questions, this problem, because we live together, we live with other human beings. We're very social beings. We have babies and children and dogs and cats and aunties and uncles and sisters and brothers and boyfriends. So we're always interacting with others. So it's like a minefield to try and work out how to be in those relationships if I'm trying to be a Buddhist, if I'm trying to use Buddhism as my basis for life. So like everything, it's like, again, I use the analogy of tennis. Every time the other tennis player sends the ball back to you, you've got to have the wisdom to know how to handle that ball. And that wisdom you've got is only dependent on how much you have learned. If you've done 3 days of tennis, you only have 3 days of knowledge in your mind. So you do your best. Well, so you have to know whether to be defensive, whether to be aggressive. You have to have, and more as you get better at tennis, you can be more and more skillful about the other person. And I'm using this in a very good example because relationships are just like that. Tennis is a really good example because it's 2 people. Just 2, So in a relationship, it's you and your boyfriend. So if let's say you've made this decision to be with this boy, you've decided he's worthwhile. You've made a conscious decision, which is often what we don't do. If we're just driven by attachment to be loved, we will choose any old peanut. And that's our problem. I think I told people yesterday, but I read an interview with that famous American woman, Oprah, and she said, in her interviews with women in their relationships, one of the most common statements from women was they were miserable in their relationship, but but he was better than nothing. It's better than having nothing. So this is a victim mentality. This is the way we tend to have relationships. If we're so full of attachment to being loved, we will choose anybody. We think, oh, someone loves me, that's good enough. And when we're just craven, you know, so that's complete victim mind. That's a disastrous reason to have a relationship. You deserve trouble, but that's so common for all of us. That's the victim mind. But if you're in a relationship and you start to become more conscious, you've chosen, you decide it's worthwhile. This relationship is worthwhile. So then, given that, like this tennis match, and you've only got a little bit of practice, and he's being mean to you or something, or he said a wrong word. So all you can do is look into your own little toolkit and see, what am I capable of? So if your tendency is to vomit out your mouth and shout, then your first practice is shut your mouth. That's it. Shut your mouth. You're not capable enough of having any kind of understanding. You're not capable enough of controlling your anger. You're not capable enough of saying something intelligent to him that'll help him realize it wasn't so cool. The best you can do is junior school, shut your mouth. That's it. That's all you're capable of. And that is already a profound practice. If you can do that in one day in your relationship, you did a good job. That's really good practice. But as you get more advanced, and you start to see your mind, and you're working on your mind every day, you can even get to the point where the anger will be there, and you'll be able to even control your anger because you've got it subdued. And it won't matter so much to you that he just said those words. It will hurt you less because you've been practicing. Then when you get really advanced, and still the assumption is the relationship is worthwhile, you've chosen to be there. Can someone unmute themselves, please? That person is unmuted. They're on my right-hand corner. Who are they? Can you see? Okay. I can't see. Can somebody who's got the tools do it? Okay, there you go. Now they've done it. So it's all a question of what you're capable of. So if you're more advanced, you've controlled your body, controlled your speech, you've controlled your mind, and then your husband does the wrong thing again. By this point, you're really subdued. You've got a lot of compassion. You know he's a good guy. You know he doesn't mean it. And it's like, now it doesn't matter to you. So it's all a question of what you're capable of. And at another point, you'll even have enough courage to say something to him. Listen, honey, you know, this ridiculous habit of yours, I think it's about time you stopped it. You'll have even enough wisdom and compassion to be able to say something to him that will help him, that won't be coming from you being a defensive little victim, you know. So everything's a question of degree, what you're capable of. But the biggest one that underpins all of this, whether it's your job or your relationship, we've got to choose. If we're driven so much, which we are now, by our attachment, by our craving, by our feeling of hopeless, I'm nobody, I'm nothing, and we grab any job that comes, we grab any relationship that comes, and we think, oh, this, you know, because we're so desperate, then everything will be a disaster. You won't ever get happy, and it will never be a good job, and you'll always be miserable, and you'll make no choices. That's what a victim does. And we're all victims. We're so full of fear. We're so full of attachment to being approved of, that we have no sense of our own worth. We have no sense of making choices. But as we progress and we get more self-content and more self-fulfilled, we will be able to make the brave choices. We will realize that relationship is just ridiculous. There's no benefit any longer in being there. And even if everybody criticizes you, you will leave it. You won't mind what people think because you know it's the best for you. You won't mind what people think when you leave that job because you know it's the right thing to do. So we need to, as we progress working on our own mind, we get more courageous and we become more in charge of our life, and we make wise decisions, and we won't mind so much what people think, especially if we're living in families or in cultures that are very strongly oriented on behaving in the right way. I mean, some cultures, you know, I mean, it used to be for all of us, but I know, like, say, certainly in Asian and Indian cultures, I don't know what Russia's like, where you've got to do what mother says. There's no way in the world you can make a decision to leave that family. You would never do that. You would do what your parents say, even when you're 50. So, you know, we've got to have courage. You've got to be prepared that people might criticize you. Not leave the relationship for the wrong reason. You do it for the right reason. But look, you know, we love, so if you're not driven by the craving for other people to approve of you every day, that's very powerful. You'll make very brave decisions. I remember I read about years ago some nurse who wrote a book she worked with dying people, and she wrote a book called The 5 Greatest Regrets of the Dying. And it was very powerful. She said the greatest regret was that from the people, the one that was most common among the dying people, the greatest regret in their life was that they didn't follow their heart. They didn't do what they really felt was the right thing, but they did what they thought other people expected of them. That's the worst suffering. That's the worst. And that was very powerful for me. You would have thought that people have regretted not walking up to Mount Everest or something. But the greatest regret was I didn't follow my heart. Instead, I did what I thought other people expected of me. That's the worst one. That's the one that paralyzes most of us, you know. We're too scared to make choices. We're too scared to upset people. We think it's virtuous, and it sometimes can be virtuous, but much of the time we're afraid of what people think of us. This is the attachment to reputation, and it's the deepest attachment of all. They say the yogis in the mountains, the greatest meditators, have given up everything, have given up attachment to everything, but they're still thinking about what the people in the village are thinking about them. This is what destroys all of us. Especially, I mean, we can see in our lives, this is our greatest suffering, being criticized by other people, being rejected by other people, being fired from our job, our boyfriend leaving us. This is when we suffer most. And why we suffer most about other people thinking bad about us is because we have this craving to be seen as a good person, because we don't have enough confidence in our own self. That's the way to say it. This is modern language, but this is exactly what the Buddhist teachings are about. As we give up this attachment, you become this brave, amazing, self-confident, powerful person, you know. And then, of course, so then, and we have confidence in what we're doing. This takes time, but we should aim for that. That's where we're heading, you know. So I think that's a good point to end on. So why don't we just do a little tiny meditation to finish, okay? And what we're going to do is the Mahamudra meditation. I might have talked about it, I don't remember. But instead of watching our breath, we're going to watch our mind. So the point is, it's going to be very natural. You're going to close your eyes, be very natural, and don't get all holy. And just simply, with strong determination, for about 3 or 4 minutes, we are going to pay attention to whatever arises in your mind. And this is a good practice for daily life, because in daily life, what happens is this. Before we start to meditate, I'll explain. This is a very good practice, because in daily life, you know, when the bad thoughts come, you start thinking why he said this and why she said this, and we never stop the conversation. We just never leave that conversation alone. So one of the major jobs we have to do, and this is what's going to help us, by simply watching the thoughts, but you're training yourself not to engage in the thoughts. So just letting the thoughts be and engaging in them are two separate things. So we all hope the thoughts will go away. That's rubbish. We have to learn to not engage in the thoughts, because if we engage in the thoughts and have the inner conversation, that's how we go crazy. So this meditation is really good. So you practice with strong determination to simply pay attention to whatever arises in your mind and let them come and let them go. That's the job, okay? For about 4 quality minutes, just watch your thoughts. No commentary, no engaging, no discussion, but keep your mind very sharp and focused. Pay attention to the thoughts. Just keep your mind focused and sharp. Let all the thoughts come and go. Just stay focused right there. Just watch them. Stay alert. Keep the mind sharp. Don't space out. Okay, relax. That's about four minutes. Better to do 4 quality minutes than 20 minutes spacing out, I tell you. What we're trying to do in these meditations is become conscious, not space out, not relax, conscious. So that we bring to bear in our daily life when we open our eyes, not, normally what happens is we're either going crazy in our head, aren't we? Chat, 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 loud, screaming, yelling, can't stop the conversation. Or we don't notice at all what's going on and all the thoughts are just there and we have paid no attention. It's either so extreme. So what we're trying to do here is become conscious by focusing on one thing, but here particularly because the mind is so powerful. So what we do in our daily life, when you open your eyes, because you're training yourself to get focus, then in your daily life, when you're in the kitchen, the hubby's there and the kids are there, instead of just getting annoyed with what they're doing, but not paying attention to your mind, you're also noticing your mind. You're developing the skill to notice your mind. And then you start to have control over your mind. That's the job, slowly, slowly, every day, being your own therapist, as Namayoshi put it. Okay, you people, goodbye. 2 hours gone like a dream. Everybody on YouTube, everybody here. So nice to see you all. I think we have more time together, don't we? Another meeting, don't we, Sangmo? Do we have? I think we do have more time. Good. I'm very happy. So we just think for 2 hours, all these seeds we've planted, every thought has been a seed that will not go astray. May we make this aspiration. May we nourish those seeds from this moment forward. Okay. So that they ripen in the future in our marvelous potential. So we will never give up for our sake and the sake of others. And then just a little prayer I'll sing, bodhicitta. May this amazing aspiration to be of benefit to others never stop. Never, may it grow and grow in the hearts of all. Jang choib sem chog rinpoche ma kye panam ke gyuchig kye panyam pa me payang gong ne gong du pelba sho. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, darlings. Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you, people. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Robina. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye.
Я могу поделиться сейчас экраном и запустить на короткую секунду молитву посвящения заслуг всех этих добродетелей. Достигну я быстро состояния Гуру Будды и приведу всех без исключения существ витальцев к этому просветленному состоянию. Это же было.